Welcome back to This Is a Commander channel, where this is a Commander channel, and today I'm going to talk about Commander, Tough Rules, and Cool Interactions, episode 115. Today's episode is going to take a look at one of the new commanders from the upcoming Murders at Markov Manor set, and it's actually a card that I mentioned briefly at the end of last week's episode, and the card is the Pride of Hull Clade. So let's take a look at it. It is a Crocodile Elk Turtle, because why not? And it is a 2-power creature, but it also has 15 toughness, and all that for just 10 and a green mana. But don't worry about that crazy high cost, because it also says that this spell costs X less to cast, where X is the total toughness of creatures you control. It has Defender, meaning that you cannot declare it as an attacker like other creatures normally can be, but then it has an activated ability for 2 blue that says, until end of turn, target creature you control gets +1/+0, gains whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw cards equal to its toughness, and it can attack as though it didn't have Defender. So clearly this big butt commander will like to have a lot of walls and other creatures with Defender or just in general big toughnesses to get the cost of it down as much as possible, but also have that large toughness for drawing as many cards as possible. I've seen some people wonder why it gives +1 to the creature's attack, to the power, when the card's draw is based on their toughness. And that's because the trigger is based on them dealing combat damage. And there's a lot of walls and defender creatures out there with just 0 power. So you do have to give it that +1 to its power initially, or else the effect will not trigger on them dealing combat damage. So the scenario for today is something that I've touched on in previous episodes involving the steps to casting spells, so for those of you who have been watching my videos for a while, this may seem familiar to what I've covered in the past, but I hope that this is interesting for those of you who haven't yet watched those earlier episodes and are not familiar with some of these steps to casting a spell. Okay, so here is the scenario. You control Wall of Mist, which is a 0/5 wall with Defender. Nothing all too special other than that it has 5 toughness. You also control a Wall of Roots, which is another 0/5 wall with Defender, but it also has an activated ability that says, put a -0/-1 counter on Wall of Roots to add a green mana to your mana pool. Activate only once each turn. So with these 2 walls combined, you would have a total of 10 toughness, which would reduce your Pride of Hull Clade by 10 generic mana. And that is, interestingly, exactly how much it is needed in its mana cost, is 10 generic. So now you want to actually cast your Pride of Hull Clade. Could you use the activated ability on your Wall of Roots to help pay for the Pride of Hull Clade's cost if you have no other available mana? If you haven't yet caught on to why this is tricky, it's because in order for you to get the green mana from your Wall of Roots, the activation cost for it is to put a -0/-1 counter on the wall, causing it to now be a creature with only 4 toughness, which means that your total combined toughness of your creature is now only just 9, which means that your Pride of Hull Clade would actually cost 2 mana after its cost reduction, and you're only producing 1 green from the Wall of Roots. So it seems that the Wall of Roots' ability is not really all that great at being used to help cast your Pride of Hull Clade. But I do have good news, and that is that it actually is a great ability to use to help cast your Pride of Hull Clade, and it actually does work. Now, the reason that it all does work out is located in the comprehensive rules in section 601.2, which is dedicated to the steps to casting a spell. Now, there are multiple sub-rules within this section, and so I'm not going to go over all of them. There's just 3 that we care about in this scenario, and that is section F, G, and H. I'll post their text on screen, and as always, they will be listed down in the video's description, but it's basically a whole lot of text that means in step F, we lock in the cost of the spell and determine what its total will end up being. If things adjust the cost in any way, like reducing it for whatever amount, then we use that reduction and apply it here, and then that value is locked in. And then in step G is when we activate mana abilities that will be used to pay for that spell. The important thing in this case is that the activated ability on Wall of Roots is indeed a mana ability. Yes, it has a once per turn stipulation on it, but that doesn't remove it from being a mana ability. If we look at something like Lion's Eye Diamond that says to activate only any time you could cast an instant, that kind of stipulation, we would have a problem. But the Roots doesn't have that problem. So we're all good there, and we will give it the -0/-1 counter after we've already locked that cost reduction in. And then finally, in step H, is when we will actually make the payment of just a singular green mana to pay the reduced by 10 generic Pride of Whole Clade. A couple other cool things about the Pride of Whole Clade: an Ashnod's Altar will work the same here, just like it did with the Wall of Roots' ability. We can have the toughness of the creatures get counted in the cost reduction, and then after that is locked in, you can then sacrifice your creatures to the altar for mana that you could use to help pay for the Pride of Whole Clade if you didn't reduce it by all the generic mana. Or maybe you just want to use some of that mana from the Ashnod's Altar towards activating the activated ability on the Whole Clade. And then another cool thing is that the activated ability to give you the card draw based on toughness will stack. If you activated it multiple times targeting the same creature, it will stack and give you 2 or 3 or however many times the value of their toughness. Just be careful not to deck yourself. That's what we used to call it back in the day. I guess nowadays it's mill. Don't mill yourself out. I know that some of you out there are even thinking of using some double strike in this deck. You're a very brave soul if you do so. If you activated this twice on your commander and then connected to a player with combat damage and double strike, you'd be drawing 60 cards from one attack. It'd be 15, 15, 15, 15. That's kind of crazy. So just remember that you still have 2 other opponents to kill after you've killed that one person by attacking them. You might want to look at using a Psychosis Crawler as well for some really bonkers plays, because its toughness grows based on the cards in hand, and with Double Strike, I'm sure you guys can do the math there. Anyhow, that's all I've got for today's episode. As always, I hope that all of you have found this video to be entertaining at least, and I hope that a few of you have even learned something about the crazy rules in this great game of Magic. Have a good one. Ta-ta!